Once upon a time, there was a fellow named Jonah. He was a prophet, which is a fancy word for someone who delivered messages for God. One day, God had a super-duper important message for Jonah to deliver. God said, "Jonah, my friend, I need you to go to the great city of Nineveh." Now, Nineveh was a really big, really busy city, but the people there were not being very nice to each other. They were doing a lot of things that made God sad. God wanted to give them a chance to say they were sorry and change their ways. Jonah heard God's message loud and clear. Go to Nineveh, tell the people to stop being so naughty. It sounded simple enough, right? But Jonah didn't want to go, not one little bit. He thought about the people of Nineveh and he got a bit grumpy. He didn't think they deserved a message from God. He didn't think they deserved a second chance. So Jonah made a decision. It was not a very good decision. He decided he was going to run away. He thought if he could just get far, far away, maybe God would forget all about him and this whole Nineveh business. So instead of packing his bags for a trip to Nineveh, Jonah started looking for a way to go in the exact opposite direction. He hurried down to the seaport, a busy place called Joppa. He looked around at all the big boats with their tall sails and sailor crews. He was looking for a ship that was going as far away from Nineveh as possible. He found one. It was a big ship heading to a faraway place called Tarshish. Perfect, Jonah thought. This was his chance to escape. He was sure that if he sailed across the big wide sea, he could hide from God. Jonah paid the captain his money and climbed aboard the ship. He found a cozy spot way down in the bottom of the boat where no one could see him. He thought he was being very clever. As the ship pulled away from the shore, Jonah probably breathed a big sigh of relief. He was on his way. He was leaving his problems and God's instructions far behind. He settled down for a long nap, feeling pretty pleased with his plan. He was convinced that out here on the great big ocean, he was finally free. But Jonah was about to learn a very important lesson. You can't run away from someone who is everywhere. But God saw Jonah. God knew exactly where he was, even in the very bottom of that boat. God wasn't angry in a mean way, but he did want to help Jonah get back on the right track. God loved Jonah, and he also loved the people of Nineveh. He wasn't going to give up on any of them that easily. Suddenly the sky started to get dark. The gentle breeze turned into a howling wind. The calm sea began to churn and crash against the ship. Huge waves, as tall as mountains, tossed the boat back and forth like a little toy. The sailors, who were very experienced and had seen many storms, were terrified. They had never seen a storm this powerful before. It was a superstorm. They quickly started throwing things overboard, cargo, supplies, anything to make the ship lighter. They hoped it would stop the boat from sinking into the wild, raging sea. They were doing everything they could think of to save themselves. While all this chaos was happening up on the deck, where was Jonah? He was still fast asleep. The captain found him snoozing away and couldn't believe it. "Wake up, sleepyhead," the captain yelled over the roaring wind. "How can you be sleeping at a time like this? Get up and pray to your God. Maybe your God will hear us and save us from this terrible storm." The sailors were all praying to their own gods, but nothing was working. The storm just kept getting worse and worse. They were getting desperate and knew something was very, very wrong. This wasn't just a normal storm. The sailors decided to draw lots, which is a way of picking one person out of a group to find out who was responsible for this disaster. And guess whose name was chosen? You got it? It was Jonah. All eyes turned to him. "Who are you?" they asked. "Where do you come from? What have you done to cause this?" Jonah knew he couldn't hide any longer. He stood up and told them the truth. "I am a follower of the God who made the land and the sea," he said, "and I am running away from him." The sailors were even more scared when they heard this. They now understood this was no ordinary problem. They didn't want to hurt Jonah, but they also didn't want to sink to the bottom of the ocean. Jonah knew what had to be done. It was his fault the storm had come, and it was his responsibility to fix it. He took a deep breath and said, "Pick me up and throw me into the sea. Then it will become calm. I know that it is my fault that this great storm has come upon you." The sailors didn't want to do it. They were good men, and the idea of throwing someone into a raging sea was horrible, so they tried one last time to save the ship and everyone on it. They rowed as hard as they could, trying to get back to the land. But it was no use. The storm was too strong, and the waves just pushed them further and further out to sea. They were exhausted and out of options. They realized that Jonah was right. This was the only way to make the storm stop and save their own lives. They knew they had no other choice, so with heavy hearts, the sailors prayed to Jonah's God. They said, "Please, Lord, don't hold us responsible for this man's life. You have done as you pleased." They wanted God to know they weren't doing this because they were mean, but because they had to. Then they carefully picked Jonah up. 1, 2, 3, splash! They threw him over the side of the ship and into the wild, churning water. Jonah tumbled into the angry waves, disappearing beneath the foam. It must have been a very scary moment for everyone on that boat. And then, something amazing happened. The very instant Jonah hit the water, the wind stopped howling. The giant waves calmed down. The sea became as peaceful and quiet as a sleeping puppy. It was a miracle. The storm was completely gone. The sailors stood on the deck in total awe. They were safe. They now knew, without a doubt, that Jonah's God was the one true powerful God who controlled the wind and the waves. They were so thankful that they offered a sacrifice to God. But God wasn't finished with Jonah yet. Remember, God gives second chances. Just when Jonah thought all hope was lost, God sent a rescuer. But it wasn't a boat or a helicopter, it was a fish. A great big gigantic fish. The fish swam right up to Jonah, opened its huge mouth and, gulp! It swallowed Jonah whole. Jonah was now inside the belly of a giant fish. It was probably very dark and slimy in there, and maybe a little smelly too. But Jonah was safe. He wasn't drowning in the sea. He was alive. For 3 days and 3 nights, Jonah lived inside that fishy hotel as it swam through the ocean. He had a lot of time to think. He thought about how he had run away from God. He thought about the storm and the kind sailors. Most of all, he realized that he could not hide from God. Not on a boat, not in the sea, and not even inside a fish. God was with him everywhere. While he was in the fish's belly, Jonah prayed. This time it wasn't a grumpy prayer, it was a thank you prayer. He thanked God for saving him from drowning. He said he was sorry for running away. He promised that he would obey God and do what he was asked to do. He understood now that God's plan was much better than his own. He finally accepted that God is in charge of everything and that God is full of mercy and love. He knew he had made a big mistake, but he also knew that God was willing to forgive him. After 3 days, God spoke to the fish, and the fish listened. It swam close to the shore, and it burped Jonah right out onto a dry, sandy beach. Jonah was free. He was a little wet and probably covered in seaweed, but he was alive and he had learned his lesson. God had given him a second chance. God didn't say, "You messed up, so you're fired." Instead, God's love and forgiveness gave Jonah a fresh start. This story shows us that no matter how far we run or what mistakes we make, God is always there, ready to forgive us and give us another chance to get it right.